Welcome to Midday Medicine Journey with Jaguar Mary X.
Hey everybody, I have a guest, Onome, an amazing vocalist and creator of transformational experiences with the voice. We'll be talking about how the voice can actually liberate us. We're going to be talking about the ways that expressing can actually shift our emotional fields, can affect our communities, and, well, first initially affecting ourselves and affecting those around us. Onome and I will have an awesome conversation about freeing your life with your voice. We went to school together, and we now, sort of we're living up here in the Hudson Valley area and doing our thing. And Onome's thing is amazing. So welcome, Onome. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
So you're here.
I'm here.
So, I just want to get started with a question about what has motivated your life. And usually that question for me has to do with where you come from, what influences you, what has influenced you in your life, your ancestral connections or lineages, those that you reach out to inspire you.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Well,
I know that's a lot.
Yeah, the easiest place to start is with my name, Onome, also known as Onome Omamomo Jerry. And that name is from where I'm from and where my parents are from, which is Nigeria, Uroboland, coastal peoples, this like south central coast of Nigeria. And it means, the total phrase kind of equates to my own freedom that is worthy of praise. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's definitely kind of like my parents knew what they were doing when they named me. Because it all definitely ties into my destiny, particularly the notion of my own, this is mine, my own freedom. What does it mean to be free? What does it mean to be self-possessed and sovereign and really in touch with my own unique creative magic in the world? So much of my life journey has been about figuring that out. And it so happens, I mean, if you know, if you have other Nigerian friends, chances are they probably have an O somewhere in their name, Ola, Oba, Ofemi. We're big on the O's. And cheese, a lot of cheese.
Yeah.
Chi-chi,
What is that about, do you know?
Just all, the different alphabets, particularly influenced by Yoruba, which is like the biggest ethnic group. We're Urobo. We're their neighbors to the south. Probably we're all one big clan back in the day, but we splintered off into like 200 different groups.
Wow.
So it's a very tonal language. They are very tonal languages, but speaking about Yoruba specifically, very melodic, very musical language, very musical language family all throughout that West African. So a lot of O's, a lot of oh yeah. That sound sensibility was always kind of in the soundtrack of my childhood, just in the way my parents' voices sounded. Like that's part of my music. It's part of what comes through in my voice. Like my father, who died back in 2005, and sadly I don't have any recordings of him. He had a very distinct voice that was very it was resonant in this way where you could hear what I now know are called overtones. He had that kind of like really resonant. You could hear the high pitches. You could hear that basso profundo all at the same time. And I can hear what I've inherited from him in my own expression. And he was also a guy who, he would kind of go on these reveries, kind of like, if you've ever been on the subway in New York City and you see the quote unquote crazy person or the homeless person who's like, on 42nd Street, and he's having a conversation with somebody on 72nd Street. We don't see that person. Or somebody from 20 years ago. Like, my father kind of had that. Like, he'd just go on these, like, extended rants about whatever was, pissing him off about the day.
Would he be speaking in his mother tongue, or?
He would actually speak in English.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sort of his captive audience. And that has definitely informed my relationship to language. And, people saying what they say and people saying what they mean, and that interesting space in between.
Oh, yeah.
And also having a name like mine, spelled Onome, and the Americanized pronunciation being Onome. I'd get Anna Marie, I'd get Anime, I'd get, all those fun. I'd see how people would kind of interpret it in within their kind of sonic box,
right?
But then they'd visually see how it's spelled, and it would kind of scramble their brain for a moment until the two can match.
Yeah,
and constantly experiencing that gap between what people hear and what people see,
mm-hmm.
and what people say and what people mean.
Yeah,
there's so much in that gap to play with. And that's where that like playfulness really comes in for me. Like I often say now to help people when they see, if somebody sees my name before they hear my name, I'll usually use a mnemonic device like Onome, like Onomatopoeia, like Onome afternoon, like Onome morning. I actually just learned a song called Onome morning. Cuckoo, as I went walking on a May morning, I heard a bird sing. So that's my new favorite mnemonic.
Oh, nice.
So all of that is informed by having a name that's so unique in the American context, but it's kind of like Stacy or Tracy in Nigeria.
Right. That's really interesting. So when you talk about this background, this kind of very vocalizing background that was so rich, how did you move into actually wanting to infuse that in a form or kind of make it into something that you were going to work with and share with people? Like, how did you get to that space? What was that journey?
Oh, gosh. It all goes back to Mr. Freeman.
Everybody had one of those teachers, right?
Yeah. Actually, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then he invisibly passed the baton to Mrs. Brown, my high school choir teacher, and also Mrs. Wiggins, another choir teacher I had in high school. And then at that point, they invisibly passed the baton to New Rican Poets Cafe. So I came to New York ostensibly under a classical voice scholarship, NYU. Not a good fit. I've taken an interesting detour that I come back full circle to actually have done my first opera a few years ago. So I took the circuitous route to find my way back to actually appreciating what opera is and what it can be. But
what is it? Was it the music that wasn't a fit, or the school that wasn't a fit, or the forms that were, or the ways that the school was presenting its classical training that wasn't a fit, or maybe?
All of the above.
Yeah.
But I'd say primarily, it was a very old school traditional training.
Yeah.
Sing like,
Right. Yeah.
I just always found that voice kind of hilarious.
Yeah, it's a performance in and of itself, right?
It really is.
Yeah.
Like now I can appreciate like actually how that came to be. Operas, they were like the live soap operas of their time in Europe, and you'd have the German speakers and the English speakers and the French speakers all singing in Italian, and so it was this interesting mix. And it wasn't like so many art forms. It was the art form of the people,
right?
And as it got more kind of refined and co-opted, and then it became perpetuated as this sort of like stuffy ivory tower art form that was heavily codified, and you can only sing it this way, and you can only have this kind of technique.
Right.
And that's just not where, after like coming from a high school where we had like that TV show Glee, we had that kind of experience. Like it was so creatively free. We sang such a wide range of repertoire. I learned so much. I really fell in love with folk music, a lot of Irish folk music, women like Jean Ritchie, this band Cordelia's Dad, was big in Chicago. Like I really had this eclectic experience. And then to go from that to this very tiny box, I was like, this ain't it. So I dropped out after a semester, and that baton, that invisible baton that kept getting, passed around throughout my life.
Mm-hmm.
New York Poets Cafe, that's where I got into poetry. What's commonly referred to as sound poetry. Although I think we need a sexier name for for the genre, but essentially, the poetry of old, the poetry that is based on oral tradition, where you actually, where the poem falls out of your face first and then later gets written down, more so than the literature first and then bringing it to life. It had more the old school.
Yeah.
What to me felt like a more organic, like falling in love with words, falling in love with language, falling in love with hearing the cadence and really being able to craft from there, and then write it down later. And also the interesting challenge of having something work on stage and work on the page. Often I find that often a poem favors one medium over another, and it's a whole other skill set to actually have it work in both mediums.
Right. Yeah.
So,
but now you're here.
I am here.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. There are more batons.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
okay.
Right.
So Nerigan traveled around, itinerant poet, landed at Sarah Lawrence, which was much more in line with my sort of liberal arts, eclectic, wanting to pull from all these different traditions of oral tradition, all these different traditions of orality and vocality and chorality, all the itties. Sarah Lawrence, from there, kind of floundered around a bit with finding that balance of paying bills and being an artist. Fast forward to Carnegie Hall. That was like a big breakthrough for me. I joined this lab that was supposed to be for like 3 weeks. We called it, eventually we gave it a name, Moving Star. That 3-week lab, like 8 years later, we still get together and do projects. I mean, I'm kind of a semi-pandemonium influenced hiatus, but we still get together for like kind of smaller clusters of projects. And that has been like just such a huge, to have that community of other vocalists who are into extended technique and just trying weird stuff and, just playing with composition, playing with improvisation and putting it all together. And sharing
And
that.
it comes together as a performance that you do at Carnegie Hall, or it's just a practice that you have, the practice is the thing, right?
Good catch.
Yeah.
Yes. So we've performed throughout New York. We've done a lot of different projects with Carnegie Hall. We kind of became like a de facto in-house teaching artists collective, like, hey, we got a singing thing we want to do with babies. Let's call up those Moving Star folks. And that's how we actually got to do a baby opera.
Oh my God.
Which is a thing, right?
I've never heard of it. Is it a thing?
It's a thing.
Like beyond Carnegie Hall, it's a thing.
It is.
Wow.
Yeah. With it's a full-on production, but it's the reason why it's a baby opera is because it's done specifically within a framework of like how do babies play and how do babies learn. So there are these particular like schemas. I mean that follow you throughout your life, really.
Yeah.
But play in terms of like, okay, so like imagine a baby having like being in some kind of playground where they have 8 different options of how they choose to explore their space. They're babies that, might see a piece of clothing and like cover themselves with it. That's the covering archetype. They're the kids that just kind of want to run around and throw things. Those are the kinesthetic babies. They're the babies that are really stimulated by different colors. So they're into like the color schematics. It's like there's a whole art and science.
I bet I can feel it. I can feel it for sure.
And then our voices, and there is an actual story, a very story that's very easy to follow,
Right.
Even on that like very simple symbolic level that babies and toddlers understand. But it's really like if I experienced that in my NYU days, I probably would have stayed.
I know. Yeah, I'm thinking about that too. I mean, I think about my mother enlisting me in piano lessons, and if there had been like an alternative way of learning and relating to music that felt more akin to what I how I express myself or how I was expressing myself at that time, I don't know, 6 years old, then I probably would have stuck with it. So, it's interesting how we encounter things and we, either latch on or we don't, depending on like the shape of the thing that's being presented to us, I'm looking at this, so I was, all right, so sound poetry sounds very exciting to me. I don't know. I mean, I guess, a sexier term could come forward, but, when I read that in your, on your website, I was like, sound poetry. In some ways, when that's what we do when we sing, it's a kind of poetry, a kind of poetics. And then also, the sound poetry, I'm thinking about what you were saying about your dad, which sounds very just like a poetic eruption,
Yeah.
just continuing.
Yeah. That's a great way to
really
put it.
beautiful.
Like a jazz solo.
Yeah, exactly. And so, now you're working with people in the community. You're a highly skilled person who's bringing forward these gifts, and you started this thing called Lush Tongue.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Sure.
I mean, I know you can talk about it, but I'm just like, yeah.
So, Lush Tongue, it's gone through many different iterations and evolutions. It initially started off as a duo of myself and one of my dearest friends, a high school buddy of mine named Margaret Morris, who made a huge splash in the world of choreography and dance and body-based visual art and music. Like, she's really, multi-hyphenate extraordinaire. And we started a duet when our paths crossed again in New York City. So we're both here at the same time. And so we started gigging around as Lush Tongue. And eventually she moved somewhere, Chicago, Bay Area, I don't remember. But we had such a good momentum going with this idea of Lush Tongue and improvisation. And she gave me her blessing to keep on evolving Lush Tongue and just see what it could be. And eventually it became a women's ensemble of like, at the height, it was like seven vocalists. And we had a good run for a while, and then we kind of scattered the four winds around the time I started doing the work at Carnegie Hall. But I would still do like my own independent projects under the umbrella of Lush Tongue. And the ethos of Lush Tongue was really focusing on illuminating the musical treasures of women, both like women who are known in the music world, like Bjork or Hildegard von Bingen, famous composer, right along with like my friends who are amazing and talented, and we would stomp the streets together, going to all these different open mics, and would share these beautiful songs, and then the songs would just kind of be inside their journals on a shelf, never to be seen again. And I was like, hey, remember that song you used to sing all the time? Do you mind if I put my own little interpretation on it? So really illuminating women's creativity, across the spectrum of like songs you would reckon like a Beyonce, as well as songs that, that would only come to life in this context. Because, the women who were writing so many who were so prolific with songwriting, they get married and have kids. The journal goes on the shelf. That creative dimension of themselves, it's put on hold. So I saw this opportunity to bring more of that beauty out into the world. And then from there, I was starting to feel a shift toward, rather than focusing strictly on, the repertoire of like women singers and songwriters, I found myself wanting to open up my practice with vocal improv and like sharing that with all different kinds of communities. I am a circle singing geek.
I remember you doing circle singing like years ago, going somewhere and doing circle singing and telling us, our cohort, about it at Pratt, and inviting us to these events. And I don't think I ever made it to one, but I was always super intrigued because Because as a mover, I know how beautiful it is to move together.
Yeah.
And I also know how beautiful it is to sing together in a kind of allowing space, like less structured than like a glee club. I also did the whole glee club thing, but just giving more agency to all the people involved, and still working together is so beautiful.
Yeah. It's like a great balance between structure and freedom.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk to you more about community work. It's Midday Medicine Journey. I'm Jaguar Mary X. You're on Radio Kingston, and I'm speaking with an amazing artist, Onome, who has been talking about life as a vocal doula, and a facilitator of helping people unleash their vocal power, which is an amazing thing to offer to people. We were talking about Lush Tongue.
Yeah.
And you mentioned off air that it sort of became this container for the other projects that or rather it sort of was the springboard for the expansion of what Lush Tongue could be. Yeah. I don't know. I'm interested in the fact that you kind of like, before you were talking about you went to these friends who had this amazing music that was kind of just sitting there, and then you brought it into the world. And that is a very doula-like thing to do.
Totally. Yeah. I just had a client call me that a voice doula. I was like, I'm keeping that one. Yeah. Thank you. And that really describes well what I do. And I just remembered there was actually another important seed that was planted, which was around the time that my friend Margaret and I started Lush Tongue. I was enrolled in a sound healing program at a place called the Open Center. It's this meditation center in New York City. And just all I was learning about all the different ways that we express through sound, the voice as well as the whole body, that coinciding with my desire at that time, my burning desire to find a community of people to sing with. My first inclination was to go to jazz improvs, which was kind of reminded me of hip hop ciphers, and they were 99% male, which is fine. They have their world and their community that I was clearly not a part of. And that was fun. And I'm glad I had that experience to realize that, this doesn't quite feel like it. But through a fortuitous series of events, I landed in the vocal improv community in New York City, which was a very dedicated group of people meeting every Monday night for years to focus on the voice.
Wow.
And that was exactly what I needed. And it was through that Monday night program I met people who were like, hey, there's this lab thing happening in Carnegie Hall. You should come, and da-da-da. So there are a lot of different seeds that planted at the same time and coincided. So Lush Tongue kind of going through all those iterations. Now it's basically like Lush Tongue LLC.
Right.
And then that's given rise to all these different offerings that I now have available, like this pandemonium, as I like to call it. It kind of forced me to step away temporarily from the live experience and pivot into the online world and kind of see what was possible in the online world. And with my ensemble Moving Star, we actually did online concerts, which was actually amazing. That's not something I ever would have considered doing if not for the pandemonium.
Right.
So I learned more than I ever thought I would about tech and making voices sync up and in this asynchronous internet space and making it beautiful and title cards, all the things.
Wow. Skill building. Love that.
Yes. Yes. And also leaning more into working with people one-on-one. So I created a program called VOKE, which is a mix between creative arts, expressive arts coaching and life coaching. Because everything that is expressed in your creativity is also expressed in some form or fashion in your life. So having people connect those dots for themselves and clear energy blocks so that they can express more of themselves and their lives and just have more creative fulfillment in their lives.
Yeah. So that begs the question then, what kinds of tools or keys do you use to help people find themselves vocally? Because I know, having been in a few sort of sound sound guided scenarios. Sometimes it is people choke up. They get very, very afraid.
Yeah.
Because so many of us come from these backgrounds where people say, I don't know, you could be just like humming a tune and someone will say, oh my God, your voice is terrible. Or you stayed with your day job, or some like off mark comment that stays with you and kind of, clenches your throat a bit whenever you speak. Not even singing, just speaking.
Yeah.
So what kind of tools and keys, like how do you inspire people to let go of that?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is the juicy bit, people. Listen up.
Juicy bit. So I would say first things first. Acknowledge what is there. If there is fear, if there is choking, if there's an urge to go and hide, I find that it's actually really helpful to name that out loud. I am afraid to sing right now. My throat is feeling tight. I'm thinking back to when I was in 3rd grade and I auditioned for the solo, and, Susie got the solo instead because she was considered the singer and there could only be one. And depending on what context, if somebody was in a workshop, I might have them speak through that fear, speak through that resistance, actually narrate it. And we might even create a little soundtrack. Some soundtrack for the resistance. For the resistance. But and it's like bringing that element of play is all it takes to, one, kind of takes out some of the sting, some of the charge out of that heavily practiced sensation of fear.
Yeah.
Just add a little dash of play. The charge that's still there, the fear that's still there, shine light on it. I might have people go through a process where they speak through it, and then I might have them do it again where they sing through it. And and then they'll ask, like, well, does it have to sound pretty? And I'm like, no, it doesn't have to follow the rules of, Western European musical theory or Indian classical theory or pentatonic. None of that is relevant in this moment. Now, if you want to learn about the structures that can support your expression, the cultivation of your expression, that's a different set of skills. But where you are right now in terms of just getting this locked energy out of you, we're not going to worry about semitones and chords right now.
Yeah.
We're just going to have you get used to your voice. So narrate what is. That's the way I would phrase that. Actually state out loud. And if it's too scary to state out loud in that moment, write it down. But somehow get it out of your system. Like start the process of getting it out of your system. So that's more of like a catharsis and a deepening of intimacy with yourself, with what's actually true for me right now, what's actually alive for me right now. Let me not pretend and then try to do something that I think sounds pretty. Actually, I narrate what is there, narrate what exists.
That I just wanted to say, I wanted to clarify, are you talking about your one-on-one work or your group work or both?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, with group work, the thing I love about being in a group is that whatever comes out of you gets to be amplified and celebrated.
Yeah.
So even if it's something that in music theory terms would be described as, dissonant, arrhythmic.
And I love all that stuff. That's some of my favorite stuff. I love dissonance, and I love like minor tones, and I love like complete pandemonium, as it were. Chaos musically, I can get into it. It's almost, for me it comes out of a jazz tradition too, So
and it's funny you say that because for so many years, I resisted jazz. I did. And it's funny, too, because my older brother, he loved jazz, particularly saxophone. He plays the saxophone. And so much of what he'd play around the house just sounded like unstructured noise to me. And I'm like, where's the music in that? Yeah, I was one of those snobs. I cop to it. Name what is. That's what was.
Hey, I love your honesty.
And it wasn't until and also at Sarah Lawrence there was one class I took where there was a heavy focus on atonal music. And for me it was like nails on a chalkboard. It was like, oh, I'm not as eclectic and free as I thought I was because I cannot get into this I need some kind of structure. Like you can go into the chaos but I need some kind of structure. But now I feel much more capable of holding a really wide range of sonic sensation from, complete atonal, complete chaos, which is actually never really complete chaos.
Right.
There is a structure there.
Yeah.
It's not as, easy, or it's not as familiar to our ears as, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, but it's there.
Yeah.
Because humans, like we are pattern masters. We can't help but to have patterns. You did the same the same person in 3 different bodies.
Yeah.
Like, why am I drawn to the same type of like we are pattern. We have our routines, the time of day that we wake up, the time we tend to eat. We like grooves in all aspects of life. And there's groove even in atonal, even in free jazz music. And so espousing that to my participants in my programs, like they get it. They get that whatever comes out of your mouth, we'll amplify it and we'll celebrate it. It'll be music.
So,
yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I had a sound healing teacher named Vicki Dodd, who was actually one of the pioneers in sound healing. They live in Washington State. And I remember being in a workshop with them. It was very odd how I got there, but it was in Switzerland. I was there with them, and one of the things she said was, feel your liver and how does your liver speak? Ooh. And then she went through all the organs. And so the task or the invitation rather was to make sounds that actually expressed that particular part of your body. So there was like this somatic connection. And that's what I feel when, like I could imagine being in one of your workshops and getting into the somatics of sound, which is, I feel, sounds like it's an important part of what you're doing as well, and a kind of way to help people sort of be okay with the sounds that are coming out of their bodies. Yeah. Can
I actually share a quick exercise?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Radio is such a perfect place.
I know it is. But before you do that, I just want to let everyone know who I'm talking to. I'm talking to Onome, who is a friend and a brilliant artist and facilitator, vocal doula, creator of transforming experiences that go deep to the heart of the matter through the voice. And also, it's Midday Medicine Journey. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you. Oh, I love your spiel. So this is like one of my foundational practices I like to share, where I have you imagine a ball of light floating in your mouth. And this ball of light represents resonance. And you just kind of, you hum, and you let that ball of light vibrate. So, and then you take that ball of light that's floating in the center of your mouth, and you let it float forward and up so that it's now behind your nose, like your nasal passage. Yeah, and then you just hum from there. You might even feel it kind of tickle your nose, tickle your cheeks. Might remind you of some childhood cartoons. And then you take that ball of light, you bring it back to the center, where there's a little more space, a little more openness in the sound. And you keep on humming, and you take that ball of light, and you let it float all the way to the back. So, so you have this big cavernous space space in the back where that ball of light is shining. And now we're going to take that ball of light and we're going to bring it back to the center. And now at this point, you're going to let that ball of light stay in the center, but you're going to let it shine brighter and brighter and brighter. And it shines so bright that it touches the buzz in the front, like up there in the balcony behind your nasal passages. And it's also bright enough to touch the boom back in that cave, in that basement in the back. So you got the buzz in the front and the boom in the back, and the buzz in the front and the boom in the back. And that, my friends, is how you get a radio voice.
Yeah.
It's a great warm-up for people to kind of develop that awareness.
Thank you.
And our entire body's a resonant chamber. Those are just 3 of them.
Yeah. Wow. Ooh, that's so good.
Yeah, it's like sonic massage.
Yeah. I'm noticing that I have some kind of obstruction in my throat a little bit. Mm-hmm. Like, I almost feel I had this is totally off topic, but I had like a physical, I don't know, can't remember what they're called, but anyway, a whole structural alignment assessment.
Okay.
Yeah. So one of my shoulders is up, one of my shoulders is down and back, and then so all kinds of things are happening, which I think, actually comes out in my voice.
You can hear you can feel the structural
I can feel some of the, it's not a total blockage. It's more like just kind of jagged. It feels a bit jagged,
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that exercise is really going to help me a lot, actually.
Yeah, it's really like an internal and external massage.
Yeah.
Sound frequency.
Nice.
And I also want to point out, like you said, that this is totally unrelated, and yet it's completely related because the voicing, singing, sounding, it is a somatic experience. So often, particularly those of us who go through the classical conservatory route, we're taught that the voice only lives here. I'm pointing at my throat. But the voice is the entire body and the entire energy field, even beyond the body. So it all ties in. And then another thing with that is, this interview is all about the voice and unlocking creativity. And, improvisation is a big part of my practice. It's interesting, the dance between composition and improvisation. So I think of, the interview where we have like specific talking points. That's like the composition.
Right.
And they're like, oh, and by the way, I noticed this thing and how my voice relates to my, to the rest of how it's interconnected with my body in this way. That's the improvisation. That reminds me of the time when I did that. That's the improvisation. And we do that all the time.
I know. Our lives are basically improvs.
Yeah.
That's how I like to think about it. That's what makes me the most happy.
Yeah.
And I want to play this track that you gave me, which is so beautiful. Do you... Can you sort of intro it a little bit while I, get it set up here?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I worked with an amazing organization called Circle Creative Collective and a woman named Jenny Wonderling. They created these site-specific immersive experiences. And I was part of an experience called LUMINOUS, which was held in Widow Jane Mine. So basically a cave.
Yeah, I've been there. I've performed there as well.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's
everyone
amazing.
Listening, you got to go.
Yeah.
If you're up in the Hudson Valley area, you got to visit Widow Jane Mine. And so I took on a role. I was the Earth, and it's funny. It's like it's a wonderful kind of typecasting because in high school I was in my senior year as part of this youth theater, and we had a play where I was some sort of like earthy diva. So there's a lot of earthy diva. Like she looks like she'd be good to be cast as an earthy diva.
And the images I saw from that are you're total earthy diva. You're total Earth diva.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
It's definitely a big part of my archetypal field.
Yeah.
So Jenny asked me, like, hey, can you just, kind of share a poem about what the Earth would say about what she wants? I was like, sure. and this soundscape is what came out. So that was improvised. That was totally improvised, one take. And
Glorious.
the engineer worked his magic underneath it. Yeah.
Wow. Does it have a name again?
Oh, yes. The name is Earth Speaks.
Great.
Child, you have all you need. You have all you need. Please, just give your gratitude, your joy, your tears, your song, and fullest presence, your truth, your uniqueness. For that is all I ever ask for anyway. And for you to celebrate the time you have with me. Dear one, please sit now with all of your relatives and hear me now. Dear one, please sit now with all of your relatives and hear me now. As you sit on the ground, listening to the sound, the wisdom of me, of we. I live through the rocks. I live through the soil. I breathe through the rocks, through the soil, through the trees, through the sky. I live the skies. I live the stars, the sound in your heart and bones. Why do you take and flesh without giving? What do you take without giving? Why do you not know? What do you not know about your own sacredness? How do you not know? Listen to the wisdom of your body's intelligence, your body's wisdom, your soul's wisdom, your heart's wisdom, your life's wisdom. Love is the language I speak. Love is the language I sing. Love is the language you are designed to understand. I speak through the trees. I speak through the leaves of every tree. I speak through the leaves of every tree. I speak through the leaves of every tree. I speak through the stars in the sky. I am the stars. I am the sky. I am the ground. I am the earth. As are you, every particle of you, every wave of you. We are one. every blade of every grass, every sand of every sea, every leaf of every tree, every speck of dust. There is sacredness. There is reciprocity. There is giving and receiving as one. How do you steal from yourself? How do you steal from the future, steal from the past when you are all one, when we are all one? We belong to each other. We speak the language of love. We sing the language of love. We sing the language. We sing the language of love. We sing the language. We sing the language. We sing the language. We sing the language. We sing the language.
That was Earth Speaks.
They can hear it on my website.
Yes.
onome.org/media.
Perfect. Perfect. So, that must have been amazing. I mean, you've moved up here to the Hudson Valley, and you're
along with half of Brooklyn, apparently.
I know. Yeah. But the thing is, you're bringing in such amazing artistry, and
Thank you.
It also is interesting to me that we're in this time when, I feel like our healing is so paramount. it's important for us to be able to release fears, find ways to sort of open our hearts and, because we are always inspired to close them down. And so what is your take on specifically how creativity, the kind of work that you do and creativity in general is so important right now for us, in this particular time that we're in?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that comes up for me is, it's often said fear is the mind killer. I would say creativity is the spirit liver. the spirit doula. The spirit, what's the word? What's the phrase? Creativity is what makes life worth living so often. Yeah. Because I think if people only had the drudge of the 9 to 5 and no creative outlet, either in terms of their own internal creativity, having some kind of outlet for expressing themselves, or some way to witness and have that empathic response, like, or even some people say live vicariously. I prefer to think of it as like an empathic response. Like that story is my story, or I can relate to that aspect of that experience, that story, that artwork, that dance. Like I see myself in it one way or another.
Yeah.
It is, it's essential. And I feel like we in the Western world in general, and the U.S. in particular, we have such a there's this weird dichotomy when it comes to creativity. As on one hand, it's so essential and in many ways so invisible, but also in many ways hyper visible and undervalued. It's like even just the way this beautiful room, the studio I'm in, this beautiful shade of like cadet blue and this dark wood, like somebody had to have the creativity to think like, ooh, this shade of blue and this shade of brown would go well together. And this kind of table, like, somebody designed this water bottle, somebody designed these microphones. That there's a certain creativity in that.
Yeah.
So it's all around. It's ubiquitous, and also invisible.
Yeah.
In that sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then on the flip side of that, something that I'm experiencing now as I foray back into doing more live events and more live residencies and negotiating contracts and traveling here to do a workshop and performance over here. It's such a. I'm making like the seesaw motion. It's either like, yeah, we don't really have much of a budget, but we can give you a sandwich. And then over here, it's like, oh, 50,000. Yeah, that's nothing. Here you go.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
And like, it's kind of a mind screw, I'll say.
Yeah.
I don't know what language we can allow to use here, but
yeah. Well, you guessed correctly.
Yeah, it's really trippy. And it's, there are organizations who are grassroots and literally can only afford, gas fare.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are organizations that have so much money.
Yeah.
And are just like, here's what you, and then there are organizations that have a lot of money, but don't necessarily value spending a lot of that money on art. So they'll still try to nickel and dime you.
Yeah.
And even though look, I know you got it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't. So that's that, like art as commerce. That's a whole conversation in itself. But like in the lived experience of people having creativity as an integrated part of their lives, there's also the entire spectrum of people who have like virtually none and just experience life as this something to kind of get through, this kind of drudgery experience. And then there are the people who are like, sign me up and are at a different, festival every weekend and are just living the life. Oftentimes it's kind of like a way of hiding from stuff. And that's its own conversation, like using creativity as a way to kind of hide from reality in the sense of if you're the kind of person who has the privilege to go to all the different Burning Man, Wanderlust, then you have the resources to help share that creativity with people who maybe can't afford the Wanderlusts and the Burning Mans. Rather than only stay up on that mountain of bliss and kind of bypass the spiritual bypass.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that so much, Onome, because I remember being in those communities where, it was a festival. It was Bali. It was, just like all over Costa Rica, wherever, just going in.
The cacao ceremony.
Yeah.
Why are cacao ceremonies such a thing right now?
Well, I mean, it is good medicine, but also it's co-opted. It's like totally, it is what it is, But at the same time, what I think... what's interesting to me about what you're saying is, like, throughout it all, there's this sense of communal play that could be celebrated more, that could be exalted, actually, within our culture as a means of helping us understand each other more. Absolutely. Because, we're not able to, sometimes we're not able to dialogue, but we might be able to dance or play. Yeah. We might be able to sing.
Absolutely.
But we may not be able to have access to our feelings about something.
Oh my gosh, yes. And I'm glad you touched on that because, as you may well be aware, we've been in this really ideologically, politically polarized, more than ever, this paradigm the past 8 years or so. And I find that singing circles are also a great way to have people kind of meet each other heart to heart in this way that transcends the things that would ordinarily have an easy time dividing people. I've had singing circles where we learned after the fact that there were Trump supporters and hardcore leftist activists there singing together. So it's possible. And I would like to think that any conversations that might happen between people who exist in those two seemingly very polarized paradigms would find a way to each other through the heart after having this kind of a creative experience, after being on the playground together, in a way that they would not have able to do that either online, in the flame war, trolling each other, or in person where you're just yelling in each other's faces.
Yeah. Wow. I love the thought of bringing back that pure singing heart. Yeah. That openness and that anchoring in possibility.
Anchoring in possibility. I like that.
Yeah. I'm Jaguar Mary X. You've got Midday Medicine Journey, and I'm in conversation with Onome. So, what's coming up next for you? What are you into now?
Yeah, well, so I like to say these last 2 years of the pandemonium were the holding back the slingshot, and this year is the whoosh. We're part of the journey. So I'm back out doing live stuff, live residencies. My next one coming up will be in Florence, Massachusetts in June, but you don't have to remember all that. You can just go to my website, onome.org, onome.org. And there's a link on my main page for people to join my email list. And that's the best way to stay up to date with my happenings. And of course, I always love working with people one-on-one, near or far. If you're near enough, we can meet in person. If far, we can meet via Zoom. I have a program called VOKE, which is a series of 7 sessions that help you transform your relationship to your own expression. And that means not just your physical voice, but really more so how that creative expression shows up in all aspects of your life. So it's really about clearing the energy blockages, clearing anything that gets in the way of you being fully expressed in your life.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I have one more question for you.
Yeah.
And that is, it's a question that I ask all of my guests. And I'm doing this series, I'm compiling information for Chrome, Chronicles of Mystical Experience. And so I'd love it if you would share a mystical experience that you've had, and it doesn't have to, you can define mystical however you like.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, I think of mystical experience as the best definition I've come across is a psychologist named Abraham Maslow. He talks about the concept of a peak experience, which I love. It's kind of like this kind of experiment. There are like 30 kids who all had really rough beginning. Parents on drugs, crime, the worst possible start in life. And scientists would follow those 30 kids and, kind of follow them along their lives, checking with them every 5 years or something like that. And, into adulthood. And, the 30 kids, as adults, maybe 28 of them pretty much repeated the patterns. When we talk about patterns, repeated the patterns of their parents, got into drugs and crime. But 2 people went on to do really cool things. And so the question was, what made all the difference in the lives of those 2 adults who didn't follow the patterns of how did they break? What was the thing that made all the difference in them breaking those patterns? And the difference was what he called peak experience, what I would call mystical experience. Mm-hmm. And the word mystical, it's often framed in this way of something extrasensory or something paranormal, something that's not explainable within our kind of limited sensory understanding of the world. And while that is true, I think it's also true that mystical experience can be something as mundane as you dating 3 people in a row who are not a good fit for you. And you're on the online dating, or you meet somebody and something just clicks. And you're like, okay, this 4th person I'm drawn to, I actually noticed that I'm drawn to this person for the same reasons I was drawn to the last 3. I'm going to choose different. I would actually frame that as a mystical experience, because, what can you point to that had you finally get it? Sometimes things really sometimes you just get it. Sometimes it's that kind of instant. It may take a whole life for you to come to that instant, but that instant was all you needed. And that instant might be what showed up in those 2, that example, those 2 people's lives. Or it might have been something profound, went to the top of a mountain, saw the whole vista, and just that moment of seeing the bigger picture in nature. Your brain connected dots of oh, I can see the bigger picture of my own life and the patterns in my own life of things that don't serve my highest good. And I'm on this summit on the mountain, and I can see the summit of my own inner mountain of different choices I can make that serve my bigger picture. Right. It could look like that. Yeah. It can look like God talking to you. It can look like a voice coming to you, a voice that doesn't sound like that inner critical voice, or the voice of your mom, or the voice of your dad. Yeah. Some
so what
ancient
does it look like
ancestor.
For you?
So I say all that to say, okay. Yeah, I was giving context.
Okay. Oh, right. Right. Yes, important. Thank you.
So mystical for me, when I think back to a Tuesday night improv jam. So I went to the Monday nights, and they were awesome. There's one time I went to a Tuesday night improv jam, and I had the kind of duet with the host where we were both, we became one organism. And that kind of, if you've ever been to hip hop freestyle, and it's just where's that coming from? Because that came through me. That did not come to me. That was a mystical experience that opened up so much for me of what improv could be. Yeah, I would say something as simple as a Tuesday night jam had a mystical experience.
Yeah, sweet.
Yeah.
Sweet. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing yourself, for coming into the studio today, for talking about your inspirations and your gifts, and just when I saw you here in the Hudson Valley, I'm just what? It's so great.
Oh, thank you. And it's so funny. I'd been wanting to move up here, years before the pandemonium, but that was what lit the fire. yeah. It's time. So glad to be up here.
Yeah.
And who knows where I'll maybe landing next.
Yeah, well, we'll have to have you on again.
I would love that.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So we've been talking to Onome, who is an amazing artist and vocal doula and sharer of creative and transformational experiences. You've been listening to Midday Medicine Journey here on Radio Kingston. I'm Jaguar Mary X. Thanks for being here.